tal, mi gente? I'm Vicky Diaz-Camacho.
And I'm Gabriela Watson-Burkett, your co-host. Now, let's dig into what's on our radar. Summer was great. And for me, something that I would love to share with you in our community, it's the end of the Academy Fellowship.
Wow, okay. And how'd it go?
Known as the Adelante Academy Fellowship from NAHJ, National Association of Hispanic Journalists. It was beautiful. Yes, the wrap-up was in Chicago. I was able to present
Love Chicago.
my project.
Yeah.
Yes, Chicago is nice. And also participate in a panel with Afro-Latine leaders in the media.
Very cool. So there's a very special article that you were talking about with me in the Kensington Voice that recently came out. It was by our collaborator, Nigel.
Yes, exactly.
Let's hear more about it. What's it about?
Yes, it was really cool to see his article on Kensington Voice. He was reporting on a public art that was open, and it was about gun violence, but also how to create hope. You know, members of the community got together to talk about the impact of gun violence, but also how community is important to overcome these moments.
That's really neat.
Yes. So the public art piece is called A Better World is Possible, which resonates a lot with the topic of the show today, right? So make sure to read the article. You can check out the full piece at kensingtonvoice.com.
All right. So when we're talking about a better world, I think what comes to mind is often the division that is kind of permeating our society today and the conversations that are difficult to have with some people in our society, whether it's our friends, our family members, it could be a stranger on the street. And I try to rationalize it. It's really hard to do, but then I found out that other people feel this way too. They're trying to figure out why is there so much distrust and division. And this Pew study from 2024 reveals that 85% of respondents in the U.S. say their political systems need major reform. So that's kind of a really astonishing number. And then additionally, 65% of people say they are always or often feel exhausted when they think about or talk about politics. Yes. So that's tough.
Yes, I think it's very telling, those numbers.
It is. It is.
Yeah. On a brighter note, though, Melanie, one of our collaborators as well, Melanie Silva, she just told me about a new bakery, a new Brazilian bakery in the Northeast.
I have a sweet tooth. Okay.
Yes, we got to go.
Yeah.
So if you live in the Northeast, or if you are willing to travel, there's a new bakery called Doce Aroma, which means sweet aroma in English. And Melanie said the coffee and the pastries are top-notch.
Chef's kiss. Okay, we're going to have to check that out.
Yes.
Coming up, our hot topic of the month, which is movements, current and historical, that push for justice and preservation of democracy. In our virtual studio today is Denise Oliver-Velez, contributing writer at the Daily Kos. In the 1970s, she was a member of the Young Lords Party, the Puerto Rican counterpart to the Black Panther Party, but also was a Black Panther member. She's a community organizer, writer, and editor, previously professor of anthropology at State University of New York, New Paltz. So excited you're here, Denise.
Thank you for having me.
Denise, again, it's such an honor to have you on the show today. We're so excited about this conversation.
You bring to the fore this idea of what used to be. So can you talk to us about your experiences with the Black Panther and Young Lord parties and what existed and how the movements kind of pushed for change?
I mean, the Young Lords Party developed out of the Black Panther Party Rainbow Coalition in Chicago, led by Fred Hampton. The Lords not only had a relationship with other groups in the Rainbow Coalition that developed, but also with the independence movement on the island in Puerto Rico. So it was pretty universalist at the time. When we first established ourselves in the Barrio, East Harlem, in New York, instead of coming in with our agenda, what we had decided the people need, uh, we asked people in the community, what do you need? What do you want us to do?
Mm-hmm.
And we thought that they were going to say police brutality, that was going to be the first thing that came out of their mouths. And it wasn't. And what they said was la basura, the garbage. And that was their primary agenda at that point in time, their biggest problem. You have to remember that I'm talking about the late 60s, early 70s. There was no huge environmental movement. We didn't even have terms like environmental justice. No, it was just garbage. And the garbage in East Harlem was piled up in the streets because the sanitation department used to go in Manhattan as high as about 96th Street and have regular garbage pickups. And that's where white people lived. And 96th Street was like you step over 96th Street and you had people in what's called Spanish Harlem, but that's kind of a misnomer because there were lots of different peoples that lived in that area, including African Americans, Italian Americans, and whatever, but no garbage pickups or not regular ones. So as a result, I remember having to go with a family taking their kid to the hospital because roaches had lodged in the baby's ear.
Oh my goodness.
The situation was horrific.
Mm-hmm.
And so we were like, oh, the garbage is your main problem. So we went to the sanitation department and asked to borrow their brooms and things like that. And they said no. So we took them anyway. We went out and started going on a regular basis to go and clean up the streets. And the old people and in the neighborhood kind of looked at us. Yeah, right. You're not going to come back. You're not going to, you're showing up once or twice, but we kept doing it. And they saw that we were not BSing. And ultimately they joined in with us and got brooms and stuff. And so we bagged up the garbage. The problem was you can bag up the garbage, but if they don't pick it up, then the rats come and rip open the garbage bags and it's the same situation again. So we finally got pretty disgusted with the lack of response from the sanitation department. And we took all the garbage and piled it in the middle of the avenue and set it on fire. They made a commitment that they would start making regular garbage pickups. There's so many issues that confront us at this point in time. And whatever I can do to open my mouth, and I very rarely bite my tongue, I'm going to continue to do until they wrap me in a flag and put me in my casket.
Well, thank you so much.
Yes, thank you so much, Denise, for taking the time to be with us here at the show. And there is so much more that we wanted to ask.
Of course, always.
So hopefully we can meet again to discuss more about your life experience that's so rich and necessary for younger folks like us and even younger.
Yeah,
to know about.
Thank you.
So we're starting Diálogos. This is our 8th episode.
It is. It is. Yes.
That's exciting. And we have the honor to have Johanna Fernandez here today. Welcome, Johanna.
Thank you so very much for the invitation.
Johanna is a professor of the 20th century history at City University of New York and author of The Young Lords, A Radical History. She is co-director of the Latinx Freedom Movement Archive and Exhibition Project, and she's writing a book on the historical roots of U.S. fascism.
So let's get into it. What exactly is fascism, if you had to break it down into bare bones?
So I think it's important to distinguish authoritarian rule from fascism.
Okay.
Under authoritarian rule, power is concentrated at the very top of society.
Okay.
under fascism, we see the self-deputization of a sector of society, citizens, who carry out political violence in the name of the state. Think about the folks who took over the Capitol building on January 6th,
Okay.
who deployed violence on behalf of a sector of the state. So I like to just frame a conversation around fascism in those terms.
Yeah.
But the question is, how does fascism arise? Under what conditions does it arise?
Mm-hmm.
And are we in a fascist situation here in the United States today? I don't think we are, but there are certainly fascist currents operating.
Okay.
But historically, fascism emerges when three conditions are operative. That's deep economic crisis, political discontent and dissatisfaction, and a threatening opposition to the state from the left. And in response to this deep crisis, the fascist government does a few things. It merges corporate power and the state. And immediately, the state, the newly reconfigured state, they abolish civil society, and they essentially ban all kinds of dissent, free speech.
Mm-hmm.
All rights essentially are radically suspended. And as I said before, the fascist leader and the fascist state relies on the activities of an angry, self-deputized segment of the population, usually disgruntled middle-class folks who deploy violence against those who are perceived as the enemy.
I mean, for those who don't know, when you mentioned the state, right? If you could break that down too for folks who might not understand what exactly that means.
So the state is the entity that has been put in place to operate society on behalf of citizens.
Okay.
So we're talking about the government, the army, the police, and all of the agencies associated with the governance of a nation.
And you mentioned that there are some elements that have been raising concern about the state of our democracy right now, especially, of course, in immigrant communities. We're seeing the deportations without like a due process, but we still didn't reach to be in a state of a fascist society.
There's active participation on the part of ordinary people in the social, political, and economic organization of society, which essentially determine how we live our lives. So that's what democracy and direct democracy means. We don't live in a direct democracy. We live in a representative democracy by name,
Okay.
only, it seems, wherein we elect individuals to carry out our interests in government, right? To make the decisions that define our lives.
Okay.
But what ends up happening in a representative democracy is that ordinary people are removed from the process of thinking about and prioritizing what's good for our society, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we give that power over to individuals who are compromised, in part because of their connection to corporate interests that are often not the interests of the people. But the question is, how is our democracy compromised? I mean, we can go down the list. First of all, there's deep discontent.
Mm-hmm.
People have a profound sense that there's something wrong with the nation. And at core, there's a deep economic crisis that hasn't really been resolved, right? So for the last 50 years, Americans have felt that there has been a large transfer of wealth from the bottom of society to the top, that it's harder to reach the American dream. And in fact, that the American dream might not even exist anymore, right? So that's a problem because it's fertile ground for authoritarianism, for repression, and for scapegoating. If people don't have a clear sense of why there's deep economic crisis, some sectors of society will blame immigrants, right? Criminals for the state of the nation and its economic discontent.
Yeah.
We have open proto-fascist currents operating confidently in American society in ways that we didn't see in the past. So think about the tiki torch marches that happened a number of years ago. I think it was in South Carolina or Virginia. The Proud Boys, the January 6th violent insurrection in the Capitol. So that's something different, right? There have always been proto-fascist forces in American society, but they haven't been confident enough to be public and to exercise power in the public sphere.
And you can sense that even globally, right?
Absolutely. We see it in Brazil, for example.
Oh, yes, very much in my country, yes.
We've seen it in Germany. We've seen neo-fascist currents in France, in England, throughout Europe. So this suggests that the threat of a neo-fascism is a response to a global crisis, right? We see a president who invited, I think it was 13 billionaires to hold office in the federal government. We've seen the influence of corporate power in government historically.
Yes.
But this is a more direct and transparent attempt to put the interest of billionaires front and center. And as you mentioned earlier, we have ICE agents who are masked, who are rounding up and literally disappearing immigrant workers into domestic and offshore prisons or detention centers without any due process.
Yeah. And
there's
profiting
also
off of that.
And they're absolutely. And that's what's a little dangerous, right? That this profiting off of the concentration of people in prisons really started a while ago with the expansion of incarceration in the United States, right? First, by hyper incarcerating Black Americans and Latinos born in the United States, and now immigrants, right? So that tendency toward violent repression in prisons has kind of been accepted in American society for many years.
Yeah.
ICE is probably the cutting edge of a neo-fascist tendency in American society. I mean, there are other elements that are important to mention. Among them, what's happening in the universities. So there is an attack on academic freedom and an attempt to strangle universities economically by the president's office. Why is this important? It's important because the university is the place historically where critiques of society and dissent by specialists is allowed. And so now those sectors of society that have historically been allowed to critique society are being attacked. But so is protest and free speech in the streets, especially if you're a critic of the atrocities that Israel is deploying against the people of Gaza.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, journalism and the press are critical to upholding truth and reality in society.
But they're tangled in court, is what you were mentioning, and some journalists are being detained. We know that. And I've noticed, revered Latino journalists have been stepping down. So we're seeing the ripple effects of this happening in real time. How do you counteract what is currently happening, right? There was a term that appeared in one of your pieces, revolutionary consciousness. And so I'd love for you to break that down, but also explain how does that apply to us today in the context of what you were talking about in that piece?
There is a battle in society over ideas that explain what's going on, right? And maybe you've seen that in connection to my writing on the Young Lords. And this gets to why revolutionary organizations like the Young Lords and the Black Panthers, but others that have been active in American history are important. Political organizations like the Young Lords and the Black Panthers understand the significance of analysis of the root causes of social problems. And they connected this, of course, to capitalism and capitalism's blind pursuit of the bottom line and profit. And they also argue that the scapegoating of immigrants, of people of color, of Black Americans, the criminalization of Latinos and immigrants, this is what politicians have historically used to deflect attention from the real problems. In the absence of that analysis, right, in the streets, in churches, in workplaces, at the neighborhood level, other forces swoop in and offer a counter analysis. So there's a battle always, a battle of ideas that seek to explain reality. And what's happened in the last 50 years is that organized forces of the left have been decimated, in part as a result of government repression. So what's left are neo-fascist forces recruiting disgruntled members of society, folks who feel that they've been left behind, and they organize that discontent against the least powerful people in society. Meanwhile, those who are responsible for the misery of many, both domestically and internationally, run laughing all the way to the bank.
And how quickly we forget the cycles of history too, right? I think the piece of that comes to mind often is that these movements, anti-immigrant rhetoric, all of that is deeply rooted, like you said, in governmental powers. So I always think of the Chinese Exclusion Act. I think of the Bracero movement on the frontera where I'm from, El Paso, Texas. So all of these things are just, they kind of disappear with time and they're not necessarily taught in schools. I put it down here. It says, a confluence of American exceptionalism and the suppression and rewriting of history has left the nation clueless about the extent of its barbarism. And that to me was just like, whoa. It really hit a chord because I don't know that we in society today can recognize how the only word that comes to mind, violent.
Yeah, I think it really translates the moment that we're living right now. Because for many of us, it's just shocking how other sides of government are just sitting. And I know there are a lot of elected officials that are trying to voice concerns, but as the American society it's okay with immigrants being deported like that. It's okay with the attack on the Department of Education. It's okay with profiting off of mass deportation from African Americans or of immigrants. It's shocking because for many of us that come from other countries, we expect that this will be a country where more democratic values will happen.
There's a discrepancy between the idea of American democracy and the reality of America historically. If you study American history, you'll read that the idea of American democracy is mostly a myth. And when American democracy has actually been expanded, it's been expanded as a result of fierce democratic struggles by ordinary people. But more specifically, what I was alluding to there in your quote is that if we get to the origins of the nation, something we don't often think about, the United States is a settler colonial nation. The Second Amendment has its origins in the arming of white settlers to help put down indigenous rebellion and slave insurrection. So this idea of citizens taking up arms against a perceived enemy is baked into the DNA of the nation. There are numerous other moments that really speak to the violence of America. 1848 is important. It's the date of the Mexican-American War, during which the United States acquires by war 55% of Mexico, which became the United States. Which is why all of the states of the South and the Southwest have Spanish names. California,
Correct.
San Antonio,
El Paso.
San Antonio, Santa Barbara, Texas. I mean, you can go on and on and on. I mean, when you drive, I remember driving across country after college and being shocked. I'm like, it hit me. Like, you know it, but then it hits you when you're driving and everything is in Spanish. Every town is in Spanish.
You feel it.
And what happened after there were lynchings of Mexicans in order to suppress their claims on the land and in order to transform Mexicans into a cheap labor force. And then there's the era of Reconstruction after the Civil War, which is most known for lynchings. There was a counter-revolution launched by the old planter class to essentially contain Black labor. Lynchings essentially helped consolidate the power of that class by deploying fear, right? But also by manipulating that's violence deployed on behalf of the state by, the next generation of white settlers. Revolutionary consciousness really is about grappling with this history. But the country would have to engage in an open, honest, and collective conversation about these past atrocities.
But the revolutionaries continue, right? And it's about bringing that back to public consciousness. It's about engaging in conversation, educating ourselves as much as we can. And I think that there's a theme throughout this show, which is like linking arms and leaning into community, which is what the Young Lords did.
Yes, about collective power.
Absolutely. And there's a long history beyond the Young Lords.
Yes.
Which has brought people of different races together to fight for economic equality and real freedom for all.
This has been wonderful, Johanna. Seriously, we could go on and on probably for another hour.
It was about many history lessons together.
Yes, love it. Hopefully this helps our audience. But thank you for spending time with us today.
Thank you so much for the conversation.
Absolutely.
It's desperately needed.
You can find links to the works mentioned in this episode on our website or on YouTube.
Thank you for joining us today. You can find Diálogos episodes on Spotify, YouTube, and on intimedia.org.
Catch up on our previous episodes, reshare, comment, and tag us, please, @News by Inti Media.
Gracias, Ashe.
Nos vemos.